Hello, you're watching Dragon Age Vidcast, Session 12, the Fighting Fantasy Conversion Project. Let's do it. Right guys, this is it. It's all come together at last. Steve Jackson's Fighting Fantasy, the introductory role-playing game. I did a video setting this up. You can see that linked, annotated on screen now, to the setup of what I was going to do here. Converting it to Dragon Age, the role-playing game, tabletop. Now, this is the Wishing Well, the first adventure therein. I've taken it, I wrote it in this book on some pages. Now, as part of this project, I'm going to make my conversion notes kit available as a scanned project at the blog. Make sure you head to the blog. The URL to that's going to be in the bar below, so check it out over there. So we're going to tell you how they got on. Now, I ran them at it at about level 3, alright? Now, in hindsight, I think they were maybe a touch too high. I would actually probably place this at level 1s or 2s and see how it goes. But you guys, you know, you could try it out and give me your feedback too. That would be cool. I've also done a post for this on the Dragon Age forums as well. So, you know, if any of you want to comment or check it out over there as well. Right, so you need to use this book, the entries in this book. Remember, if you want to try picking it up, I'm going to stick some links in the bar below as well for you to try and find it, or you might be able to find it elsewhere. Now, this is the original one they did. Other ones came after. They did the Advanced Fighting Fantasy Dungeoneer, they did Black Sand, they did Riddling Reaver, but these are all basically by the guys that do these sort of choose-your-own-path type solo dice adventures, a book made instead for a GM to use for a party. Obviously, it's very, very rudimentary basics inside this book, so it had to be converted for usage with it, and this is a higher fantasy than Dragon Age, so a lot of the things had to be interpreted. So there is an interpreted story. Again, if you're going to be a player, be careful, there's spoilers as of now. Let's go. Here is the map that you see inside for the Wishing Well. That's really cool. You see everything all there is numbered, and then all of the pages are numbered accordingly, so it's like a choose your own adventure. But you see there, number 4, so if they go into room 4, you just read that, and so on. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the conversion notes here, and how it went with the players and my thoughts on, you know, how it went. Right, so they are working for House Peranti at present, and they have found out that a mad professor has been using this place inside a Wishing Well as his secret laboratory, where he's been conducting all sorts of genetic experiments. Just a whole lot of screaming and nasty, freakish things are going on down there. So it's time to hunt him down, however. When they do finally arrive, it's going to be a case of the princess is at another castle. Well, not quite, but he has more than one lab, and this one's being disused. But they don't know that, so they're going down there anyway. But hey, it's a dungeon run too, so that's cool, right? Intro page here, Wishing Well. Again, you'll be able to see all this scanned anyway. But the basic idea here is that I've also had it that a dwarf exploration band went off with mining tools. They went in there, they haven't returned. The idea is that they've gone nuts and or died in the place, so that gave it a bit of a theme. This Wishing Well is the only leftovers of a town settlement on the coast. It's just literally the well there, you know, giving an indication that there used to be a settlement around it that was wiped out mysteriously, some years ago. In the book you'll see plus attack strength. Obviously that's the way they term things in here, so that is to hit and obviously not to damage. When converted. Note also you'll see gold written in this book because that's what it uses as currency, so you probably want to convert that directly to about silver. Any hidden rooms at your process should maybe be found on maybe searching test 14, something like that. Anyway, read intro of book and let's get going. So in they go to the start area. Did they light a torch? It's dark. Will they lose footing? No, they did light their torch, they were all right, and they came to the door eventually, and they hit the door, found they couldn't break it down initially, Obviously, I was going to let them start to have a go at doing it from the second hit. But this time they knocked the door, and it gave them a riddle. Now, this has been added in. There isn't a riddle in the book. Think of this, really. I mean, even if you've done this as, the Wishing Well 2.0. So this time, the door gives you a riddle. It goes, "Hands I do not have, yet I grasp so tight. I love darkness, my enemy is light. Both the mighty and low know me well, for in the hearts of men do I dwell. What am I?" So, what is it? What's the answer, guys? Quick, quick, quick. What's the answer? Get your answers down. I wonder how many of you said shadows. That was starting to be bandied around. If you said shadows, you're wrong. The correct answer was punched forward by Tanadil, amazingly, even though he's a mad-ass barbarian, and he said fear. Yes, fear is the answer. So the door opened on its own accord. No need to smack it down. Just a little bit of retro fun there to add to this retro goodness that's already there. Just that retro style. This is 1984 printed on this book, by the way. Wowzers. Well, then they meet the crazy dwarf. The dwarf that has gone absolutely bonkers, Thrushbeard. And I portrayed him as a mad, crazy person. He's one of the expedition that has gone here and gone missing. And now he's got all these thrushes living out of his beard, and he tosses them all a nut, and he gets very, very hurt if they won't eat his nuts. And I've put in here just a little Constitution stamina test just to check for indigestion that might give them 1 piercing damage. That Tanadil didn't want to eat the nut, and he was looking up his nose at Tanadil until Tanadil had the nut, and then that was it. He was all right, and he gave them the information about the place that he's able to give them. Got stats in the book as well, just in case it goes to combat. What I've done with this conversion guide is taken the cutouts you find in the typical Dragon Age thing, glued them in here. So, yeah, he's got quite a lot of HP, hasn't he, actually? You see, it's only my rough writing, a lot of this. I mean, a lot of it hasn't been written perfectly for the public, because a lot of it was just for my own needs. But I'm sure that experienced enough GMs will be able to interpret what I've put here and use these effectively enough. So they got past that anyway, and they decided to go west out of the room, and the passage turned around and up into the north, and then they came up into the room with the painting and the objects on the wall. What you have to love about these books is that every page has supported imagery. That's cool. That's really cool. Well, they didn't put the necklace on and problems like that, but that's in here. What would happen if they did? And I've changed the leather pouch so it's a copper coin instead of anything else. But they ended up putting adding a copper coin to the pouch, actually, which was interesting. Obviously, it will help you more if you're able to get hold of this book, because then you can follow it and do it yourself and follow along with this video and really know what the hell it is I'm talking about, because I don't want to say too much about the content of this either, because I don't want to get into too much legal discrepancy with this company. From here, they worked out that everything was indeed an illusion, but they left all the gear pretty much alone. They didn't take any of it. They ended up in the room with Nandras the wizard, obviously he being apostate in the Dragon Age universe. His room just starts appearing out of nowhere, and he starts speaking to them, saying, "Yes, they've already found out that to get at the Spider King, who is called Zalagahalti, they are going to need the crystal key." I love how the dwarf in the first room says, "He used to be a spider." He's basically a complete genetic mutation, a fusion of things that this mad professor person has just fused human and spider together, and it's horrible. You'll see, anyway. That's how you technically get a Spider-Man. Nandras says, "All right, well, I will give you the location of the crystal key if you do something for me, because, my powers of protection have been holding me alive in this place, and I can guard myself against most of the dangers, but there is a new danger that has arisen recently, and my powers cannot yet guard against it. So you must deal with the supernatural threat. And if you do that and come back to me, I will assist you in getting the key. So he didn't tell them what it was. So off they go. Now, originally, in the book, you're supposed to fight a mummy. Okay, and there's hieroglyphics all around the room and cool stuff. I mean, look at that. That's cool, right? Cool little retro picture. Now, that wasn't going to swing for Dragon Age, of course. And I could have put something in there, another kind of undead, that was tangible. But I decided, no, I've given it an interesting theme here with the dwarves. So, what I've done is I put in a dwarf apparition. Now, he's all statted up in this thing for you. He doesn't have a great deal of health, but mundane damage cannot hurt him. So this dwarf, there's been a cave in and the dwarf bodies are sort of lying there, and, it's this dwarf ghost appears and attacks. So yeah, mundane weaponry won't work. Spells obviously will. But I've put a new stunt in there called Spectral Attack for 3 stunt points. It allows you to do normal attack damage. However, you use magic, not strength, in that calculation. So whatever your magic score is, it's your inherent anti-ghosty driviness awayness. They blew over this a little bit too easily. They got some real lucky procs together, and we do have a mage who's able to output some outstanding damage too. So I wrote in here now 1 dwarf apparition per 2 player characters, and you could give that a go, because I really did feel the encounter needed to be harder. If that's a problem, just, throw 3 at them or something like that. Or just massively raise the hit points level of this 1 if you just want the 1. But I didn't think for level 3 at least that it was going to work out very well. Because the thing I was really concerned about was, because this is a very old retro dungeon crawl sort of thing, it's very combat and combat and combat and combat. And I get very worried about that anyway, because I don't want it to get too boring just to be fight heavy anyway. But, also I want them to have a chance. But of course they did the exact opposite and just peed over all of that. So, experienced it once, and I can advise you on how you might be doing it next. So, anyway, they defeated that, and they went back and they got the crystal key, and it floated from Nandras's hand straight to Amelia, the Templar in training. Yes, he's almost goading her to, try and make a thing of it that he's a mage. He wants her to. He's that powerful and confident. He just doesn't give one. Anyway, they made their way up and through a door that went off west from that into a room with a wood pixie in. Now, it's a whole load of forestry, drawings of trees and foliage, and just a beautiful scenic landscape there drawn on the walls and ceiling, so it continues on. And when you're staring at it, the illusion of it almost begins to take you over. You could almost swear, I can hear the birds, I can, hear the insects. I really am in a forest. You start to almost believe it. And there's a pixie there to spot with a perception seeing. And, depending on how you behave with that pixie, it will behave in different ways, as listed in this book here. Our guys, they were all right with it, and our mage spotted it. The dog spotted it and started barking up at it, and then the mage saw it, and Karak, he held out his stave, and the pixie landed down on the stave, and he spoke to him and said, "We mean you no harm," and he sort of back flicked off and flew up again, up into the air. And Tanadil was getting ready to throw a rock at it, but Karak managed to talk him out of doing that. That could have got interesting, I suppose, for Tanadil. And then they went to a room that was south of that, which was a sort of dungeon with a number of skeletons manacled to the wall and 3 chests below them. Now, I made a point of saying that some of these skeletons were indeed dwarves, and they were asking, do the bones look as if they are fairly new, like they could be, the dwarf expedition that had gone missing? And I said, yeah, that would be feasible. They said, does it look like they've, decayed on their own, or do the bones look fresh enough to have been stripped? And I said, well, the latter, actually. And this professor's a mad git. The idea here is to build the tension and the suspense that the skeletons are going to come to life, and as you go towards the skeletons, all the wind gusts through, maybe the chains begin to rattle, and something begins to happen, something, some of the bones knock together, you hear it, it sounds like a macabre wind chime, but no, They're not going to come to life. The expected won't happen here. It's the chests that are potentially dangerous. So we had to decide, what order they were going to do the chests in. They were very, very careful to make sure they opened the chests with the point of a sword at a distance and pulled the chest open like that. Now, out of interest, the chest with the ghost in, it was a ghost of a dwarf, of course, jumped out of the box and scared the party, and, well, it put the creeps up Tanadil, and he was -2 attack for 30 minutes. So that was an interesting way of doing it, by doing it by the clock instead. And I really do like that this book, does tell you for however many minutes they reduce their thing by this. So, I had the clock there, and I thought, oh, cool. The last one was holding a magic wand, or what appeared to be anyway. Amelia picked it up to explore it, and then it changed into a serpent suddenly in her hands. And she had to try and do a Dexterity 18 initiative. Now, obviously, it's got to be really hard because it's turned into a serpent in your hands, so it's going to try and bite your wrist. So it's got to be extremely difficult. So she got bitten, and then it was a Constitution Stamina 16 to avoid taking a -2 Dexterity for 30 minutes because of the poison. But she passed that one, so she was all right. So the serpent's off in the room, and Tanadil steps on it with a squish, and that's the serpent dealt with. Now, one of the things that the party's doing, and it really is very recommended that you do this, is make a map as you go. Because obviously you, the GM, you've got the map on every page listing up in the top corner here, right? Nice little map of the whole place, cool. But the players don't. So they're going to want to do that to make sure they haven't missed any rooms and make sure they're going to be able to get out and that sort of thing. So they went back to the Dwarf Thrushbeard's room and then went out of the west door from that room instead. And then that passage turned up north, and they came to a trap room. So this trap is fairly interesting, actually. I will show you an illustration of it so it doesn't get too complicated. Now, I've made it that in in this creation, and you can show all these to your players as you play, and that's really great that it really happens to capture it. And there's a bottomless pit, essentially. Well, it's not bottomless, but you can't see the bottom. The fall would pretty much kill you. I've said that the walkways are actually longer than they appear in the picture. They're actually extremely long walkways indeed. I've had a Dexterity Traps 17 to work out how it works. Again, really look at the proper post of the scans of these pages to really get the gist of this. But, yeah, it was a Dexterity Traps. Paydar failed the Dexterity Traps thing to work out how the trap actually works, the pitfall trap. So what they did was, they didn't want to take any risks. They tied a rope around him, and they sent him out onto the walkway. So, this trap is kind of devious, and I've sort of rejigged it a bit to be even more devious, and you can jig about with it however you wish, but this is how I did it. So they tied a rope around his waist and sent him out onto the walkway, and then the platform that he was standing on began moving back towards the door, thus making the gap that was needed to jump to get to the other platform wider by the moment. So, the trap will be flushed in 6 turns' time, and jumping to the other side needs a strength jumping 11, which goes up 1 per round. And a fall is going to need a strength climbing 14 to be able to, save yourself, or you're done for. And indecisiveness wastes rounds, and it really is a case of, counting every 10 seconds on the clock, having a look and, saying, okay, it's even more now, keeping in mind, how much time they're wasting. They have to decide quickly. And the problem is, before he even got off the first walkway, the door they were in slammed shut. Now, I haven't had it like it's these wooden open and shut doors. I've had it that it's actual openings. Just an opening. The door kind of like slid across like that. Slam, like that. And what it did was, it slammed across the opening. They were all out still in the corridor because they didn't want to risk it. And it snapped the rope. So Paydar's stranded inside the trap room, and none of them can see what's going on at this point. So they have no idea how their friend's doing. They can hear him panicking in there. So, he's jumped and he's just about fallen, couldn't quite make the other side, and he pulls himself back up, and then that walkway begins pulling towards the door. and he's running for the doorway. Just as he gets to it, the doorway begins also to slam shut. So he dived through that one as well. And of course, I've put another dexterity traps in there to realise that the other door and the rest of it is there. That's only a 14 this time, is booby trapped that way. But he failed that too. You can also do a strength might to try and hold the bloody thing open, with each person helping, reducing that by 2 points. But of course, he was all on his own, so he had to use dexterity acrobatics to try and dive through. He failed that, but not by much, so it pretty badly injured him and broke 2 of his fingers, colliding with his hand on the other side. So he's then stranded on the other side of the doorway, split up from the team, and they can't see or hear him anymore. So they thought, okay, we've lost Paydar now, we don't know what's going on. They don't know if he's dead or not or what's happened. So, because of the map they've been making, and they probably wouldn't have been able to do this if they hadn't have been map making, like I said, you see, they worked their way back up through the system and figured, oh, that probably connects to here somehow. So if we go back up the middle chain, we can probably get to the north side of it if we turn west and then down. And they were actually right. That was a gamble, and it worked out. Lucky for them, or Paydar would have been completely lost to them. But before they could get to Paydar, they had to get through another room first as crossing west. Now, in the original, in the book, it's a very strange encounter. There's all this stuff in the room, okay, in this illustration. And the book sets it up to make it look like it's 2 lizard men in a bed. Well, in terms of Dragon Age, that's not going to swing, is it? So, page entry 13, you'll find this on. I wrote here, ignore book entry. Instead, you do a cunning healing target number 11 to figure out that there's no bed here or anything. There's a kind of lizard man-ish thing. But this thing is a fusion, a genetic fusion. It's not created by birth. It's a failed experiment, half man, half dragon kin type thing. So this mad professor's taken the scales and claws, but not wings, as a male, of course, and sections of a dragon and put them onto a man. These scaly bits are like glued onto the face, and it's just a horrible fusion of alchemy and magic and things like this have made it happen. This guy, he's twisted. So anyway, it's a creature that just wants to die. And it's got a chain coming from the wall that goes into its back, which is fused to its spine. It tears across the room at them, bounds at them. And the idea here is if they stay right flush at the doorway, it can't quite reach them. But of course, they engaged it into the room anyway, to fight it and put out of its misery. However, it wants to die, and it will particularly threat aggro onto anyone who decides not to try and kill it. It will particularly go for them. And it's been driven mad and angry with pain, and I've put a bit of description here for it as well. Anyway, they managed to put this thing out of its misery. Again, probably a bit too easily, so you might want to look into that. Again, though, level 1s and 2s might be alright with it. So again, you could take a look at the difficulty challenge here and decide what to put it up against. As I say, my party of 4 and a dog at level 3, they found most of this fairly easy. After getting through that, they met up with Paydar at last. At last! And saw his broken fingers and did some healing on him to splint him and try and work it out. Luckily, he was still able to fire his bow. Now, they finally made their way across, back up into the centre area, which works up into a sort of cavernous area, and they hear the sound of rushing water. So there's a river that goes west to east. And there is a sort of mermaid sitting on a rock, combing her blonde hair. And so she does this seduction thing and pulls it over the players. So I've had them test willpower, self-discipline, and I've made the test really, really difficult. I've made it 17, just because, you want one of the males in the party to, at least one of them, to be taken over her. And, particularly mischievous GMs could even have males start clambering with each other to, get her attention and to be the one. And they're trying to wade out into the water to get at her. And Amelia was the only one that wasn't taken by her, that and Oof the dog, of course. So they go out into the water, but they manage to shake out of it in the end, and Amelia shakes them out of it and shouts them down sort of thing, and the spell is broken as soon as she freaks out and jumps into the water, because I didn't want the thing dragging out too much. It wasn't going to be able to work out to combat. Amelia wasn't jumping in and attacking, but they were stopping the other guy from wading out too much to her. So she freaks out, she jumps in the water and she swims off down the river, because it says in the book a 50-50 chance to meet a giant octopus, so on my go it did emerge for me, so up comes this thing. Now, the giant octopus, it was a great idea. I've had it so that it can use 1 minor and 3 major actions per turn. If you want to make that even harder, you could increase that to even more. You could say D6 actions or something. But initially I had it as D3, but that really sucked, because 1 major for an octopus. It's got a tentacle smash, reasonable damage only. It's not too terrible. It can do, after a tentacle attack, it can do a grab, a constrictive thing that forces them into a threshold 10 strength might to break out of it. And they can spend stunt points towards escaping the threshold of its tentacles wrapping around them. Not an overly powerful foe, and again, you see, you can soup it up a bit more if you need it souped up. But again, I would be interested to see how level 1s maybe handle it. Then they cross the river after killing this thing with no danger to themselves really, and find a passageway that just carries on and on and on. Now the idea with this, and it is an endless passageway, is that you're supposed to try and keep the players in there with your skills for descriptive narrative as long as possible, while keeping an eye on the clock without making it too obvious. And for every minute that they are in there walking along, they're losing 1 hit point. And, to be fair, once they've lost about 5 hit points worth, once they've been in there about 5 minutes, if you can keep them that long, you should explain, the walk, you can feel the fatigue of the walk getting to you a little bit. Maybe if they stop to even rest, you could say, for some reason you just feel more tired the longer you even just wait here. It doesn't feel like you're getting any more refreshed. And so don't even allow them a breather in there. There's something suspicious going on with this thing. And of course, account for the return trip as well, because that that's going to take the same amount of HP out of them getting back. So once they realise, and of course you keep the description going, you keep saying, oh well, the thing is raising up, now there's a load of moss in this bit, so you've got to be careful because it's slippery on the left side, so you're going to have to inch to the right. And I had there's rock really come close together, and they've just got to sort of just about squeeze through, and there's a bit that gets luminescent from the fungus growing there, and different moulds and things, and describing how it arches round here and then slopes at one point, and how it begins to get hotter in one section. And I kept them in there a good 6 minutes or so, most of them except one of them that turned back after 3 minutes. So, 6 minutes equated to 12 HP loss from fatigue of walking. But, of course, this just drains them. It is a trap, essentially, and if they carry on, they will die. They work their way up round then into the west upper side of the section, and they came to a huge natural cavern. Now, the web in there that you can break, and that there's nothing behind, it's only really relevant if someone's stuck in it while someone sets off the juvenile berescan that's in there. Now, in the book, they've got it as a Nandi bear. Well, I've made it a juvenile berescan. Obviously not a full-on berescan. So this thing comes out, perception seeing maybe, to not get pounced on by it, and then a dex acrobatics to not have a surprise round. And they beat this thing down pretty well as well. It does put out a fair good bit of damage. It's got a quick bite stunt, and it's got a bellow type roar as well. And it's just a general dumbed down version of the big berescan, the main one that you can fight at sort of later encounters. There was another room up there where there's supposed to be a hellhound in there, in a room of darkness with a darkness spell on it. So I've had it, yes, it's indeed a darkness spell, and then, you know, the red eyes glow in the room, and you hear the growling coming from inside the room. But I've had it said that it's an illusion. And I've done that because it's like, oh, not another combat. Ugh, combat. It's like, you know, the way to solve a lot of these problems is just keep giving you fights and things. And I just wasn't happy with the pacing of that, because I knew that there was a bit more as well. So, you know, I didn't want to just offer that. They can just try and work out that it is an illusion somehow. Our lot did it by, you know, firing ranged weapons into the room, and, you know, it went through the eyes and sounded like it clattered the ground and didn't make any other sound and change it. I had other eyes then join it as well and sort of intimidate them. Nothing came out of the darkness at them, even though the opening was open. But obviously it was just to deter them from going into the room and stumbling around in the dark and finding the corpse and looting it for what would have been money on it and such. Then they opened the room to the final boss. Now I let them know that this was the final boss room by the crystal key glowing into this radiant blue colour as they, you know, slot it into the lock. And they had a nice Zelda moment. Zalagahalti, a creation of the Mad Professor. I've also had it so that his throne room is also a conjoined sort of laboratory as well of the Mad Professor at the back. One of the factors that I've added here to the Spider King final boss is the illustration for him. Way hey. You see in the original there, the skill, stamina, and, you know, the attacks and that sort of thing. So, I had to make him a little bit meaty, so took the giant spider stats and sort of elited that up and raised some health and things like that, just to try and make it a bit more. And gave it defense 16. Now, that makes it incredibly difficult and tiresome to try and hit. But our lot were indeed hitting it a bit too easily anyway. And it's got a natural sort of exoskeleton armour. And there is the factor of the tiny little spiders that I've added in all over the ceiling, and they are weaving this big golden web thing on the ceiling above it. So if they don't bow, the idea was originally that if they don't bow to him as he asks, that the web drops and gets them all. So in this case, it's the small spiders that release the web on him. On the party. But, of course, these small spiders will actually factor into the fight as well during it from the second round afterwards, attacking randomly. I just worked out with Constitution Stamina 14 tests, or else you suffer 1 minus dexterity and d6 damage, and d3 bites of people per round. Just as an extra little sort of, there's a spider on you and it takes that long before you've knocked it off and you carry on trying to fight the boss. And so these things keep coming down. They're coming down sort of upside down on these webs, and it just creates this creepy atmosphere that they're coming down in places. And they're the size of a hand each one, but, you know, that's small compared to this great big bloody thing that's in front of you. It calls itself a Spider King. So this group web thing, you know, they all got encased in it. I didn't leave any way for them to be able to get out, because I thought, that's great, you know. It just covers the entire room. It just goes straight down on top of them. Yeah, if they're standing in the room, they get webbed. That's all there is to it. But I've made it fairly easy to get out of. So it's a Strength 14 advanced test with only a threshold of 5. So, I mean, you can do it in 1 round. And Karak, our wizard, managed to break straight out in 1 round. And, of course, freed people can help as well, adding +1 to the test. And I mean, but actually, yes, I did put a dexterity 19 acrobatics, thinking about it, for you to be able to dodge it. You know, amazingly, pretty much not going to happen, basically. So he can do a poison bite stunt, injects his poison to put you at -2 dexterity until the end of the counter, or a heal spell for 2 stun points. And, of course, this would probably stack with the -1 dexterity from the little spider as well, if you want to be really, really evil. Decide upon how well or badly your team are doing, though, before you would do that. Because, obviously, it's poison and poison, so you might kind of like argue the case, well, you know, it's the same source. I don't really want to do that to them. It can do a major action web shoot, 12-yard range. But, of course, they can do a dexterity acrobatics to get out of the way of that. Well, they eventually killed it, but it did drag on a bit. They found it difficult going, again, because of that Defense 16 to hit the darn thing. And then under its throne, they searched there, and they found a box with a note in, saying that the sealed door, which they'd found, a sealed door, and they tried everything to open it, and of course it was magically protected, so it wouldn't open by any means. It says it opens by a spell, and the word spell was underlined twice. Now, this inadvertently, it's not in the book, it gives them a clue that the number 11 is needed, because the 11 on its side would look like a double underline, of course. Once they find the room with the tome in it, we had the mage, who has got the arcane lore ability. I mean, it's going to want someone with arcane lore, really, to start reading the book effectively, to be able to do it well. I mean, if somebody doesn't have arcane lore, then, you know, you could start to impose extra problems on them. I don't know, you could raise the amount of pages they potentially have to search through. But, yeah, I mean, we've got 20 pages they've got to go through, and it's on page 11, the spell they need to be able to open the door. They do this. As soon as they open the spell book, a fanged skeleton materialises and begins attacking the party. Now, these are the armoured ones. Again, not too powerful, these fanged skeletons, but they are certainly more powerful than the normal kind of skeleton. And they can do blood healing on themselves as well, where, you know, where they can bite an unconscious person and heal their own health up. Now, the way that you should probably do this is because every turn of the page is a round of combat, right? And they'll probably be killing fanged skeletons left, right, and centre. Then you'll just be spawning another one in and another one in all the time the book's open. As soon as the book's closed, the skeletons will stop spawning. So each time, then the person looking through the book says, "Oh, okay, page whatever." You know, and he did take quite a few rounds until it came to him. Double underlined, actually. Yeah, let's try that. 11. That looks like an 11. Yeah, I'll try 11. Of course, it is 11. The way we did it in the end was Amelia ended up blocking up the entranceway, just standing there in full defense mode with shield raised, because that's where it kept spawning in. So we had it right. Instead of it keep getting destroyed and another one getting summoned, we'll just work out what damage it does to Amelia and how much she can guard against it while looking through the book. And she's trying to hold out, because it doesn't matter how much damage you do to them. You should probably just have the one of them appear and say that any damage done to it automatically fixes itself back together again. So it's got, you know, unlimited health, this thing, all the time the book is open. It makes it invulnerable. You could give a clue even that something in the book, you know, flashes, that it, like, gives off a spell, and that's, like, connects with the thing being suddenly reanimated back together, the bit that was just damaged or knocked off. So you finally managed to find it, and then, of course, opened the treasure room and got at the treasure inside, and much hurrahs went up. But, of course, talking about the laboratory that was found, well, they found some notes in there, and they found that one of the ingredients listed was by somebody, by the professor, called Damus Arcan. Now, that name was familiar to Paydar, because in his ancestors' backstory thing, the mage that, when the Dales were taken, killed Paydar's ancestor, and he witnessed it through his ancestor's eyes. If you want to see that trilogy of backstory, you can get at the videos on screen now. Check it out, it's really, really quite cool. The third one's the absolute best of the lot. That is the actual showdown with the ancestor versus... But how is it him? How's he been alive all of this time? Huh? How does that work? Oh no! That's like... Well, that's generations and generations ago that happened. And of course, Paydar really wants to get at him. He never would have dreamed in a million years that he would have actually had a chance to get his hands on Damus Arcan. And so there you have it. You have all the notes you need for the project. You can see the undertaking I've done there for this mini dungeon, the Wishing Well. The plan is also to do Shagrad's Hives at some point, and do that for the Dragon Age universe, and have it be another one of the abandoned labs of Damus Arcan. Also, guys, if any of you want to try undertaking that before I do, say so you know, get it done in a fairly good time. Let us know what sort of tier it's for, and maybe I'll use your suggestion instead of me doing it. But otherwise, I probably will end up getting round to doing it and making it another one of Damus Arcan's labs. Is he in this one? But who knows when that would be for? Would it be tier 1 or tier 2? You know. Right, we'll wrap it there. Thanks for tuning in on this, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.